Clara Hayes had never asked for much from the world, only enough grass for her cattle and enough water to keep them alive. But the land was cruel that spring, cracked open under a pitiless Sunday. She rode her bay gelding Copper across the dry prairie, scanning the horizon. That was when she saw it movement near a dry creek bed. A wild mare, bleeding from her flank, staggered against the rocks. Clara swung down from the saddle, rifle in hand, wary of wolves. Instead, the only danger was the mare's failing strength. Clara muttered, "Easy, girl," and pulled her kerchief tight. The wound was bad, a long gash oozing, maybe from barbed wire or a cougar's claw. Clara knelt, pressing cloth to slow the bleeding. The mare shivered, eyes rolling, but didn't kick. "Got fight in you yet," Clara whispered. She poured whiskey from her flask over the wound, the mare jerking but not bolting. Copper nickered nervously, pawing at the dust. Clara stroked the mare's neck. "You stick with me, we'll both see another sunrise." She bound the gash with strips torn from her shirt, then fashioned a rope halter. With patience and grit, she coaxed the mare to follow home. Back at her ranch, a humble spread of weathered fences and sagging barns, Clara stabled the mare beside Copper. The stranger trembled but accepted hay and water. Clara worked by lamplight, cleaning the wound again, humming low as her mother once had. The mare's eyes softened, and Clara felt a strange pull, as if the creature wasn't just some wild stray, but meant to find her. She named her Sable, for the black shine of her coat beneath the dirt. "You came for a reason," Clara said, patting her neck. "Maybe you'll show me what it is." Days passed, and Sable healed slowly. Clara tended fences, rode herd, but each evening she returned to the mare. Copper grew jealous at first, but soon accepted her. Then, one dawn, Sable whinnied sharp, tugging at the rope as if urging Clara to follow. "What's got into you?" Clara muttered, grabbing her rifle. She saddled Copper, let Sable lead on a loose rein. The mare walked with purpose, steady despite her healing wound, across gullies and brush, until they reached a patch of hills Clara had never scouted. There, half hidden in scrub, stood a cabin old, weather-beaten, and silent. Clara frowned. The place wasn't marked on any map she knew. Boards covered the windows, the door sagged, yet faint smoke curled from the chimney. "Someone's living here," she whispered. Sable snorted, stamping her hoof. Clara dismounted, rifle ready, and crept closer. The cabin smelled of damp wood and something acrid, like fear. She pressed her ear to the door. A faint voice, hoarse, pleading, carried through the cracks. Clara's gut tightened. She shoved the door open. Inside, tied to a chair, was an old man, skin bronzed by sun, hair in long braids. His eyes widened with desperate relief. "Thank the spirits," he rasped. "They left me for dead." Clara rushed inside, cutting the ropes with her knife. "Who did this?" she asked. The man slumped forward, gripping her arm. "Men, riders from town. They wanted land I would not sell. They said the papers were mine, but I told them no." His gaze burned into hers. "They will come back." Clara eased him onto the cot in the corner, heart pounding. She had expected outlaws, but not cruelty like this. The West was harsh, yes, but some men were wolves in human skin. The man's name was Tahu, an Apache elder who had once tended these lands before fences carved them. His voice was weak, but his pride fierce. Clara cleaned his wounds with whiskey, wrapping strips of cloth around his arms. "Why'd they leave you breathing?" she asked. His eyes narrowed. "Because they thought fear would finish the job, but I still breathe." Clara respected that kind of grit. "You're safe now," she promised, though she knew safety was scarce. Sable stood at the door, ears pricked, as if guarding them both. Clara thought again how strange it was the mare had led her here. That night, Clara kept watch with rifle in hand. The prairie stretched black under the stars, every sound amplified. Tahu dozed fitfully, muttering in his language, while Sable paced outside. Copper lifted his head once, ears flicking, before settling. Clara sipped bitter coffee, eyes never leaving the horizon. She'd seen this pattern before, men trying to drive someone from land, scare them with terror, but binding and leaving an elder to die crossed a darker line. She whispered to herself, "What kind of devilry are we walking into, girl?" Her hand rested on Sable's mane, as if the mare held answers. At dawn, Tahu stirred, insisting he could walk. Clara supported him outside. He gestured to the hills. "These lands hold water, springs beneath stone. That is why they want them." Clara's brow furrowed. Water meant power out here worth more than gold. "So they'll kill for it," she muttered. Tahu nodded. "They already tried." Clara's jaw tightened. She had lost too much in her life to let greed carve another scar. "Then they won't take it," she vowed. Tahu studied her, then said quietly, "The spirits brought you. The mare chose you." Clara glanced at Sable, unsettled by the truth in his tone. The three rode together back to Clara's ranch. She offered Tahu her bed while she slept on the floor. He protested, but she silenced him with a glare. "You'll heal faster this way." Over the next days, he regained strength, eating her cornbread and beans, teaching her words in his tongue. In return, Clara showed him how she mended fences, broke horses, and kept coyotes from her chickens. Slowly, the house that had once echoed with only silence now carried voices, two stubborn souls, and the quiet snorts of Copper and Sable. Clara almost forgot the danger that waited beyond the hills, until the riders returned. Clara spotted them from the ridge, 4 men, rifles glinting, circling near her land. She spat dust, anger simmering. They hadn't expected her to fight. "We've got company," she muttered to Tahu. He limped to the porch, eyes hard. "They think I am alone." Clara cocked her rifle. "Not anymore." The men rode up bold, smirking. Their leader called, "Afternoon, miss. Fine horses you've got. Be a shame if trouble came to them. Why don't you hand over the old man, and we'll call it square." Clara stepped forward, rifle leveled. "Or you can turn back alive." The standoff stretched taut. One rider shifted, hand near his pistol. Clara's finger brushed the trigger. Then Tahu's voice rang steady. "This land is mine. You have no claim." The leader spat. "You've no law here, old man. We'll take what we want." Clara fired, the bullet kicking dirt at his horse's hooves. The animal reared, nearly throwing him. "Next shot don't miss," she said flatly. The men muttered, curses sharp. Finally, the leader sneered. "This ain't done." They wheeled their horses, galloping off in a storm of dust. Clara exhaled slowly, rifle still steady. The war had begun. After they left, Tahu laid a hand on Clara's arm. "You risk much for me." Clara shrugged. "World's already taken plenty from me. Not letting it take more if I can help it." His eyes searched hers. "You carry grief like stone, but you also carry fire." The mare saw it. Clara frowned. "What's she got to do with this?" Tahu smiled faintly. "Sometimes the land sends guides, sometimes on 4 legs. Clara shook her head, but when she stroked Sable's neck that evening, she couldn't shake the sense that Tahu's words held more truth than superstition. The next days were tense. Clara worked double-tending cattle, scouting ridges, cleaning her rifle nightly. Tahu insisted on helping, limping less with each sunrise. Together they rebuilt a fallen fence, Tahu steadying posts, while Clara hammered. "You work like a warrior," he remarked. She smirked. "I work like a rancher who don't want her cows wandering." But his words warmed her, though she hid it. Each evening they sat by the fire. Tahu told stories of rivers that sang, mountains that dreamed. Clara listened, feeling the land around her grow richer through his voice. She realized she hadn't felt alone in years. But the riders were not finished. One afternoon, Clara found her barn door hanging open, feed scattered, chickens missing. Copper whinnied in alarm. She drew her rifle, scanning tracks, boot prints, and hoof marks leading south. Rage burned hot. "They're testing us," she growled. Tahu laid a calming hand on her shoulder. "They want you to chase." Clara clenched her jaw. "And what if I do?" His gaze was sharp. "Then you ride into their trap." Clara spat. "Then we make our own." That night, they set lanterns at the fence line, shadows playing like guards. Sable stood watch, ears pricked. The waiting had begun. Clara slept little, dreams restless. She woke to Copper's sharp neigh. A rider lurked near the fence, shadow moving in lantern light. Clara was up in an instant, rifle in hand. She fired a warning shot, splintering the post inches from his boot. The man cursed, fleeing into the dark. Tahu stood beside her, calm as dawn. "They test your will," he said. Clara's eyes burned. "Then let 'em test steel instead." The riders might have thought her a woman alone and weak. They'd learn soon enough what stubbornness and rage looked like when cornered. The next day, Clara and Tahu rode to the hidden cabin again. Inside, she searched for clues of why it mattered so much. Beneath a loose floorboard, she found deeds and maps, land rights, water claims, proof of springs hidden under the hills. Tahu nodded grimly. "This is what they kill for." Clara tucked the papers into her saddlebag. "Then we'll use it. If law won't stand for you, we'll make sure everyone knows." Tahu's eyes glimmered. "You would fight their greed with truth?" Clara met his gaze. "Only thing I've got sharper than my rifle." That night, voices rose again on the prairie, drunken shouts. Mocking laughter carried on the wind. Clara and Tahu stood side by side on the porch, rifles ready. "They'll strike soon," Clara muttered. Tahu nodded. "But you are not alone. Remember that." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the comfort she found in his words. The mare snorted from the corral, copper stamping, the night alive with tension. Clara set her jaw. "Let 'em come." The West had taken too much already. This time, she was ready to fight, not just for herself, but for something bigger. The horizon flared with torchlight riders approaching, flames in hand. Clara's stomach clenched. "They'll burn us out," she growled. Tahu loaded his rifle, steady as stone. "Then we stand in the fire and turn it back." The riders thundered closer, shouting threats. Clara raised her rifle, the crack of her shot slicing the night. One torch fell, snuffed in the dirt. Sable screamed, rearing, Copper charging the fence. The ranch became battleground, shadows leaping with firelight. Clara's heart pounded, but her hands stayed steady. She had fought storms and droughts, now she would fight men. The first shots lit the night, wild and ruthless. Clara ducked behind the trough, firing back, each bullet aimed true. Tahu's rifle sang beside hers, sharp and measured. Sparks leapt from the barn as fire licked its roof. "Not today," Clara snarled, charging forward. Sable kicked the gate wide, Copper following, scattering riders with fury. The night roared with chaos, but Clara's focus cut sharp. Protect the land, protect the truth, protect the ones who stood with her. This was no longer about survival. It was about justice in a world that rarely gave any, and Clara Hayes would not yield. When dawn finally broke, Clara Hayes stood in the yard, rifle still smoking, body trembling with exhaustion. The riders had scattered into the hills, leaving behind blood, broken torches, and a barn singed but still standing. Copper blew hard, sweat steaming off his hide. Sable circled the corral, snorting like a war drum. Tahu limped from the porch, face calm but eyes fierce. "You fought well," he said. Clara wiped soot from her cheek. "Not near done yet," she muttered. The prairie was quiet again, but she knew silence was only a pause before the storm returned, harder than ever. The following day, Clara buried the fallen rider near the cottonwoods. She said no prayer, Men who came to kill earned what they got. But she marked the grave with stones anyway, out of respect for the land. Tahu watched in silence, leaning on his rifle like a staff. "You honor even enemies," he murmured. Clara shrugged. "Ground don't care whose bones it holds. Might as well lay 'em proper." He nodded, approving. Sable lowered her head near the stones, as if paying her own tribute. Clara stroked her mane, thinking again that this mare was more omen than chance. Word of the fight spread fast. By week's end, neighbors rode out, some curious, others cautious. Jensen the storekeeper brought coffee beans and shells. Mary Wilkes delivered bread, her brothers trailing with hammers to help patch the barn. "Callaway's men won't stop," she warned. Clara tightened her jaw. "Neither will I." They worked together, fixing fences, raising new boards. Clara wasn't used to so many hands at her place. The silence she'd lived in for years now filled with voices, hammer strikes, and laughter. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable, yet deep inside, Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known she missed. But shadows lingered. Tahu warned her each night. "Callaway is greedy, but not a fool. He will not rest while proof of his theft exists." Clara kept the deeds and maps hidden beneath floorboards. Every evening she sat by the lantern, reading the names, the signatures, wealthy men who had stolen springs and left families ruined. She whispered their names like curses, memorizing each. Copper shifted in his stall, restless. Sable pawed the dirt, watching the horizon. Clara felt the land itself bracing, as if holding its breath. War wasn't over. It had only just drawn its first blood. The next attack came swift and brutal. Riders stormed at dawn, guns blazing, their shots shredding fence posts. Clara and her allies fired back from the porch and barn windows. Smoke filled the air. Horses screamed. Bullets struck wood and stone. Clara's aim was true. 2 riders fell hard into the dust. Tahu's rifle cracked steady, each shot deliberate, unshaken. Jensen shouted orders. Mary Wilkes reloaded rifles faster than most men. But Callaway himself led this charge, scarred jaw gleaming, eyes blazing with hate. "This is mine!" he roared. Clara leveled her rifle. "Not anymore," she muttered, and fired. The bullet struck Callaway's arm, spinning him in the saddle. He cursed, gripping the wound, but stayed mounted. His men faltered at the sight, some breaking off. Clara pressed the attack, firing again, her allies holding strong. Copper bolted forward, scattering riders, while Sable reared, hooves slashing air like fury made flesh. Dust churned, cries rang. Then, as suddenly as it began, the raiders fled, dragging their wounded leader with them. Clara lowered her rifle, chest heaving. Her porch bore holes, the barn smoked, but her land still stood. She whispered to herself, "Not today. Not ever." Afterward, Clara tended the wounded among her neighbors. Mary's brother had taken a bullet through the shoulder. She stitched it with whiskey and grit. "You saved us," Mary whispered. Clara shook her head. "We saved each other." Tahu approached, laying a hand on Clara's arm. "Your strength is not just yours now. The people see it. They will stand with you." Clara wasn't sure how to answer. She'd lived so long alone, fighting her own battles. Now others shared her war. It scared her more than bullets did, but it also gave her a strength she hadn't expected. Later that night, Sheriff Harlan rode up, lantern swinging from his saddle. He dismounted, surveying the bullet-scarred yard. "Heard you stirred up hell with Callaway." Clara folded her arms. "He came to me. I only sent him packing." Harlan sighed, scratching his beard. "You've got proof that'll ruin half the county's fine men. They won't forgive, Clara. They'll paint you an outlaw if they can." Clara met his eyes, hard as iron. "Let 'em try. Truth don't scare easy." Harlan studied her a long moment, then tipped his hat. "You're stubborn. Maybe stubborn enough to change this place." Weeks passed, filled with tense peace. Clara worked the ranch, patched fences, kept rifles close. Neighbors brought supplies, some staying overnight as guards. Children even played in her yard, laughter mingling with the creak of the windmill. For the first time in years, Clara heard joy on her land. Yet each evening, she touched the floorboards under which the papers lay, reminding herself of the storm that still brewed. Sable stood near always, watchful, Copper steady at her side. Clara whispered to them both, "If they come again, we'll end this once and for all." The final showdown came with the new moon. Callaway returned, wounded but unbroken, flanked by nearly a dozen men. Torches flared, rifles gleamed. "Clara Hayes," he shouted. "That land is mine by right. Hand it over or die in the dirt." Clara stepped onto her porch, rifle in hand, Tahu beside her, neighbors behind. "This land's been watered with enough blood," she called. "Yours can join it if you like." The torches advanced, firelight dancing across the dry yard. Clara's heart beat steady. Tonight, there would be no retreat, no warnings. Tonight, truth would be bought in lead and smoke. The riders charged, torches high. Clara's shot rang first, felling the man at Callaway's side. Tahu's rifle cracked, Mary fired, Jensen shouted. Chaos erupted, bullets splitting air, torches hurled toward the barn. Copper screamed, Sable burst free, scattering flames with her hooves. Clara fought like a storm, reloading with mechanical precision, firing without fear. Callaway roared, spurring forward, his pistol aimed at her chest. Time slowed, her rifle rose, breath steady. She fired. Callaway lurched, struck square, falling from his horse. The torch he carried snuffed in dust. Silence crashed heavy as his men faltered, then broke, fleeing into night. When the dust settled, Clara stood trembling, rifle smoking. Callaway's body lay still in the dirt. His empire ended not by wealth but by one woman's refusal to yield. Neighbors lowered their guns, some cheering weakly, others too shocked to speak. Tahu placed a hand on her shoulder. "It is done." Clara looked at him, then out at the broken torches, the wounded earth. "For now," she whispered. She knew men like Callaway never truly died. Others would rise in his place. But she also knew she would meet them the same way, head high, rifle ready, fear buried deep. They buried the fallen at sunrise, the cottonwood's branches swaying gently. Clara stood hat in hand, saying nothing, yet her silence carried weight. The land seemed to exhale, freed of a curse long festering. Neighbors clapped her back, promised loyalty, swore to stand again if needed. Clara nodded, gratitude tight in her throat. She was not alone anymore. The haunted ranch had become a place of gathering, of strength. The bones beneath the floor and the papers hidden under it had bound them together. Clara knew the West had taken much, but today it had given her allies. Sheriff Harlan returned days later, papers in hand. "These will ruin powerful men," he said grimly. Clara leaned on her rifle. "Good. Let 'em burn." He shook his head. "It won't be that simple. They'll come with lawyers, bribes, maybe even hired guns," Clara smirked. "Then they'll find the same thing Callaway did." Harlan studied her, then said softly, "Maybe you ain't just keeping land. Maybe you're building something bigger." Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure she wanted to be anyone's symbol. But deep inside, she felt the ranch breathing stronger, like it agreed. Seasons shifted. Spring brought green shoots to the prairie. Summer burned them gold. Autumn rusted the cottonwood leaves. Clara worked the ranch, rebuilt barns, expanded her herd. Copper carried loads, Sable healed fully, galloping free across the fields. At night, Clara sat by the fire with Tahu, who told stories of spirits and rivers. She listened, finding comfort in the rhythm. Slowly, the house once haunted by silence filled with warmth, voices, even laughter. Clara realized she was no longer surviving, she was living. The West was still cruel, but here, she had carved her own refuge. Yet she never forgot. The papers remained locked away, proof of greed and blood. Some nights, she read them again, whispering the names of guilty men. "You'll get what's coming," she'd murmur. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not by her hand, but truth had patience. Sable would rest her head on Clara's shoulder then, as if reminding her to keep faith. Copper would snort softly, steady and loyal. Clara drew strength from them both, from the land, from the fight. She was no longer the woman who lived in silence. She was Clara Hayes, and she carried the West in her bones. Travelers began to visit, drawn by stories. They wanted to see the ranch of the woman who stood against Callaway. Some came in awe, others in doubt. Clara let them look, but showed nothing of the hearth's hollow. That secret belonged to her and the dead. Still, she shared bread, coffee, sometimes even stories by lamplight. Slowly, legend grew. The cowgirl who paid 25 cents for cursed land and turned it into a fortress of truth. Clara didn't care for fame, but she couldn't stop whispers. Legends have a way of rising where courage leaves marks. Years passed, and the ranch thrived. Clara taught children to ride. Neighbors leaned on her wisdom. Tahu guided them with stories older than the fences. Copper aged gracefully, Sable strong and fierce beside him. Clara watched the prairie shift through seasons, but one thing never changed her resolve. She had become something more than she ever intended, a keeper of land, a voice for the voiceless, a shield against greed. At night, she sometimes stood on the porch, staring at the horizon, whispering, "Let them come. I'll still be here." The wind always seemed to answer, carrying her vow. When strangers asked why she stayed, Clara would shrug, "Because it's mine." But deep inside, she knew it wasn't just about ownership. It was about the McCreadys whose bones she'd buried, about Tahu's people who'd lost their springs, about every life ground down by greed. It was about proving that even in a land built on taking, someone could stand and say no. Clara Hayes wasn't haunted anymore. She was rooted. Her ranch wasn't cursed. It was consecrated by struggle, by fire, by blood, and she was its guardian. That was enough for her. In years to come, folks still whispered about the haunted ranch. Some said ghosts roamed its halls. Others swore Clara Hayes herself had become half legend, half storm. But those who knew her said she was simply a woman who refused to yield, who turned curses into strength and silence into justice. On quiet nights, Clara sat on her porch, Copper and Sable nearby. She'd tip her hat to the horizon and murmur, "This land don't scare easy, neither do I." And the West, for once, seemed to nod back in respect.